Welcome to Project Insight's Professional Development Series. Today's session, What If Scenario Planning for Executive Decisions, focuses on helping leaders and project professionals make smarter, more confident decisions in complex portfolio solutions. Successful execution starts with understanding what's already on your plate and how it aligns with organizational goals. In this session, we'll explore how to use what if simulations to model delivery dates, resource capacity, and portfolio scenarios, then evaluate trade-offs to determine the best path forward. A few housekeeping notes. Everyone will be on mute. Please feel free to use the chat as we go throughout this session. PDU certificates will be emailed before the end of the week. The trick is you must stay through the full attendance to be able to get that link. And then this recording will be accessible via the place you're joined at today. I'm Matthew Sparks, the Director of Sales and Business Development at Project Insight. At Project Insight, we've helped thousands of companies find a complete picture of organization-wide work via our project, program, and portfolio management solutions. With me is the wonderful Diane Buckley-Alwies. She is the founder of Core Performance Concepts and brings decades of experience improving operational efficiency through project and product management best practices. Diane, you ready to get started?
Yeah, it's you and me today, right?
It's just us against the
It's just
world.
us.
We've got it.
We're all
We've
good.
got it.
We're all good.
Yeah.
So, Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah.
Welcome to our 2026 kickoff here. And it's a great topic. I mean, I love what the technology is doing and all the stuff we could do now with the what if scenarios. And I'm excited to see what Project Insight has in store for us by the end of this year. It's just going to go faster.
Yeah, it really will. I think the key is, regardless of tool or not, these are all key competencies, right, that we're using in the kind of line of work that we're in with managing projects or portfolios,
Absolutely. And so, we're going to start off with, what are we going to try to learn here today? Basically, successful execution starts with knowing what you have already on the plate. One of those things is if you don't know what you're working on, you're going to end up working on the wrong things. And I've been in organizations where they really didn't know what was on the plate. So, we're going to talk about knowing what's on your plate. And then we're going to talk about the key areas that you need to make sure that you are clear on where the strategy is within the organization, such as delivery dates and capacity. And then what are the things that we're wanting to simulate? So as we go through this, you're going to kind of know your baseline, and you want to know what you want to change, and you're going to be able to measure it at the end so you can make better decisions versus just like, pull it out of the air, say, well, I think we can do this, no problem, right? Or, everybody's had those situations where all of a sudden management comes to you and said, we got this great new client and they want to go live in November and it's now January and they weren't on the plan, right? So how do you deal with all that stuff? And I think this conversation is going to be great and very helpful and beneficial to everybody on the call.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to start off with just a refresher on why a portfolio is important. If you understand all the work that's being done within the organization, and everything we do within an organization, has purpose. If it doesn't have purpose, then you have to question why it's there, right? That's what we learn in project management. What is the purpose of every single project that we're working on? And if you have a decent plan, then you can have some steady and sustainable success. If things are changing all the time, or if nobody knows what's important and what's not important, you're going to have a lot more chaos. So if we have a portfolio of projects and programs that we're working on, we're going to be able to maximize our organization's potential. It's like everything should have that purpose. Everything should be striving for that vision, and everything needs to tie to where we're going as an organization. And that's what's going to drive success. And if I'm assuming most people, have dabbled in the stock market and or have, nice 401k portfolios, it's no different than that. You're going to have various activities within that portfolio, like stocks, bonds, cash, gold, little crypto, maybe you got some properties, and they all have different returns. It's no different within an organization when you have different projects going on and they have different returns. You might have a project for your HR department on putting a new system in place. You might have, some product initiatives where you're putting new features or a new product out to the market. You might have infrastructure activities going on where you're going to be changing out your whole data center because you're going to do a lot more AI. So you need to have a much more bandwidth. Every single one of those initiatives has its own unique return that's expected by the organization. And those things all play into the financial health of an organization. That's how, in theory, that's how our executives are able to predict where the company's growth is going to be at the end of the year. So portfolio management is super important for healthy, successful organizations. And so we're going to talk further about that. But first, I want Matt, you're going to show like the portfolio capabilities within Project.
Yeah, I am. I also love that comparison, Diane, so much that, it's the idea of, your financial portfolio and the concept where I'm going to get these returns in these different buckets at this time. I want to stagger that out so I maximize what I can get back. I think when you make that comparison, it makes it really easy for people who even might be really deep in the weeds to understand, oh, I'm a part of this bigger picture and this is what that work looks like, right?
And sometimes, like just like that financial comparison, one or two of those probably have the best return. So which of the projects do you want to make sure are delivered? Right. The ones with the lowest return or the ones with the higher return?
I like the higher return. I like my baseball cards that I got when I was a kid, and I keep them in a shoebox in the event that, they maybe are worth something one day. But I feel the things that are, in my 401 and so on. Yeah, you can put it on there. Put it on there. Right. My insurance has it.
I know. It might be 1,000% return on what you paid for it.
Well, that's true. A little inflation as well. Yeah, exactly. So, awesome. But yeah, within Project Insight, we make it really easy to handle that portfolio or program, or obviously project management. Here we're in a portfolio. So within Project Insight, a portfolio allows me to combine together projects and or programs, which is just a collection of projects as a whole, right? So thinking of the pie that we were just looking at, that's the pie in its entirety as far as that's concerned. I can see on this particular page the programs that make up my digital customer experience portfolio. So these are the programs underneath it. And then down below in this report, I have the ability to see all of the projects that then make those up. The nice thing about this, as with just about any list view in Project Insight, is it's a drag and drop system, so I can manage this really easily. Do you need to have a tool to manage this type of work? No, of course not, right? It makes it easier. It makes it more streamlined for other people to be able to collaborate, but we are bringing on a new customer right now who was using sticky notes, like the true Kanban, Diane, right? Like that's how everything was being managed previously. So, but the idea here is I can see the status of the work. So is it active? Is it approved for discovery or whatever statuses we want to be using? I can see the names of the projects, the affiliated program that they're a part of. And then to the idea of what sort of return am I getting? What's the priority on those, right? Are these my most critical parts of my portfolio? Are these things that may be a little bit less than, and we're going to call those high, medium to low? These naming conventions are yours, to do what you care with. Who the responsible party is to get these done, and then so on.
Yeah, it's such valuable information to see it all in one place. Right?
It makes it handy. Yeah, exactly. If I'm the leader in charge of all of this, I don't need to hunt from sheet to sheet to sheet or do any of that. If I want to click into the project, I can go into that. Or if I want to go into any of the different views, which we'll explore here in a moment, I can do so, right here just by driving with my mouse. Especially in the event that maybe we're going through our prioritization for this year or the work that we're doing, right, Diane? I can come right in here and click and inline edit these and say this is actually medium now, as opposed to it being critical as we go through those kind of end of year, beginning of year, whatever sort of timeline, you do these on. Some customers of ours do it quarterly. You can do that. If you prefer to use that board view, right? We were kind of joking about sticky notes, but if you do like that, I personally love it. You can come in here and view all of those same projects on the Kanban where I can move them across from one to another really readily by just kind of coming in here and drag and dropping or clicking on them and finding out the details associated with that. You can look at these over time. And this is again where you have the ability to drill in and see what's there in the same way that, we're looking at, those individual pieces. Now I can see into the granularity of some of those milestone tasks, what the names of those are they due or not? And then if I do want to add in that priority category, I can just come in here and insert that into the data part of my Gantt chart as a whole. And then we'll talk more about task level and kind of making the pause on these sorts of things when we get into more scenario planning within the tool. But here, even from the portfolio level, I can get into the task list, see all of my programs. I can drill in and see the individual projects that make these up and then drill into those tasks as a whole. So if I am that executive leader, that portfolio manager, the program manager, or even one of these projects as a whole, I have these predefined views which make it really easy for me to be able to access. So,
and it is really important as we get into this next section here. It's really important to understand those priorities. And to your point, we've got the flexibility to use high, medium, low, medium, high, various things, or you can use something like expected return. You can change those drop downs and those values however you want to perceive it within the organization. And then as you're putting that portfolio together, before we insert something that we're going to want to do what if on, you got to figure out, do I get all the highs done first, or do I do them in sequence, or however you want to do that. So having that level of categorization is super important as we get to the next step here. So once I want to understand the contribution of each of these projects to the organization, I want to also understand whether it's a short term or a long term, because you can have something that's high priority, but it's not due for 2 years, right? You can have a program that's running for a couple years, so you're going to see value. Oh, hopefully you're seeing some value or some hitting some milestones that are producing some value over time. But you can't just blindly say, well, we're only going to work on high priority items. Right. Because if all your high priority items are long-term initiatives, you're never going to see any short-term gains, and vice versa. Right. So if you do everything that's high priority is a short-term gain, where does your long-term vision come into play? And how do you still achieve that? So you really have to understand that baseline that I talked about earlier and having that roadmap. And we've had at least one webinar talking about a couple months ago about your organizational goals, your roadmap, where you're taking everything. What are the precursors to that roadmap? Some things that you might have to have in place, like maybe you need to update your data center infrastructure first before you can get into the new AI capabilities that you want to explore. So there's definitely going to be things that have those dependencies. And then you need to worry about those critical resources. And we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. But let's delve into more about the where what you have today. And I look at it from the perspective of everybody's going to have an ideal delivery date. And what I mean by that is you've got different departments that are going to be pulling on those resources. What are the things that they really want to accomplish and when? And going back to some of our previous conversations, you've got the planned items, like you have commitments to your customers, you got organizational goals, you've got maintenance items that have to happen, and you want to continue with some innovation to kind of grow your company because you don't want to be stagnant. So understanding that roadmap and where we're going is going to be important, because that's helping you identify those priorities or that return on those projects. And then this is actually the hard part, because everybody wants everything. Right? What are the critical deliverables? What are the non-negotiables? What has to happen this year? And that discussion can only be done if you understand the return, right? What has to happen for us to at least achieve a 10% growth of the organization? If we did everything we wanted, could we get to 20% growth? Maybe. but what's the things that what's our minimum? And our senior executives have to, report to those boards, and they have to, be able to say, with confidence that we have the ability to achieve that growth. And these all play into that. So what are the things that are the non-negotiables? And those need to be clearly identified. It could be a critical client deliverable. It could be, product enhancement that sales is saying that if we don't have them, we can't sell what you're wanting us to sell, right? It could be a big regulatory compliance issue that's hitting this year that you have to have, that takes precedence over everything else. Otherwise, your business, you go out of business, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. 10% growth is out the window because you're 100% loss as far as that's concerned, right?
Well, right. If you miss that, if you're a regulatory driven organization and you don't meet those targets, then you're SOL, right?
Right.
And
100%.
And it could be a maintenance issue too. I mean, I've seen companies where they spent a year or two prioritizing a lot of that infrastructure work so that they can launch into the next, iteration of their products and move things forward. So, and again, no, everybody's going to want everything, right? And every department, are not equally weighted, so that's where senior management comes in on helping you identify what are those non-negotiables. So we can't do good what if scenario testing if we don't have those non-negotiables defined, right? Because I could certainly push the button and push the critical things out because they use up our whole critical resources, and we'll do all these little ones. We don't want that to happen. You want to make sure your what if scenario is reasonable and it takes this into consideration.
No Veruca salts here, as far as that's concerned. I said no Veruca salt. You don't get it all, right? You can't do everything, or most of the time you can't. So that's where this
all
concept
have
comes in.
Unlimited resources, right?
Yeah, I think
we all have.
Everyone on the call wishes, as far as that's concerned. Exactly.
And then, speaking of resources, right? Then it's a conversation about resources. And I want to remind people that resources aren't just people. It's physical resources, it's warehouses, it's manufacturing floors, it's, it's office space. If you're growing really fast and you don't have room for another person, you got to go buy a building and you have to get that building, or maybe you have to build a building. Resources is not just people, or from that perspective. So what are the critical resources that we have? Where are constraints? Right. So, is there something we need to make sure that we're managing from that perspective? Yep. And these next three are really about the people. I find organizations out there that end up giving their most talented people the biggest problems, when in reality, you should be giving your most talented people the biggest initiatives. Where can we put the talent towards success versus, putting their finger in a dike and plugging a hole, right? I mean, there's ways to handle that stuff, and your resources within your organization. You've got people that are extremely knowledgeable of your business, extremely knowledgeable of your technology, extremely knowledgeable of your work, your processes, your business processes within the organization. And those are the people that you want to have working on those top initiatives to ensure that they succeed. And then there's a whole concept of staff retention. Everybody's got their employee engagement surveys going on right now, right? Everybody's been doing that for years. And it is really important to have the pulse of your organization, because these portfolios don't happen by themselves. People have to be willing to work on them, willing to push a little bit, because again, everybody's going to want everything, and it's never going to be for lack of things to do. There's always going to be things to do, and how do we best incent our people in our organizations to stick with us and to work with us? And then there's growth. If I know I'm growing, I got to hire, and I've got, I'm going to build some bench strength. And then how do you handle that? Because a lot of times organizations don't take into consideration, I want to grow 20, 30% as an organization. And I know I'm going to hire 10% more workforce, but who's training them? Who's bringing on that next generation of workers within the organization? And you might need some of your best people. So we got to think about all those critical resources and where we want them to support the growth that the portfolio is going to achieve. Right.
Right. It's hard for you, Diane, to train the next generation when you are executing all of the most pressing pieces throughout our portfolio as a whole. There's no way that you can do that. And I'm positive that your employee retention survey is going to say that, right? If that is the case.
Yeah,
So,
and that's like within Project Insight. I know you can allocate. I can't even speak here. Allocate portions of people's time to things beyond just the project work, but it's
right.
all in benefit of that portfolio. That's
Yeah.
everything ties to that. That portfolio should be, if the organization says we're going to grow 20% this year, that 20% needs to be coming from what we're working on.
Right. 100%.
And then, now you've got your baseline. You've got, we know the current state of the organization. We know the non-negotiables. We know when things we want to have things delivered. And then something new comes in, because January 1st, you had a plan. And on January 3rd, you got a contract for something that wasn't in the plan. Right.
Yep.
So that's always going to happen. It's the old adage from finance side of the house, is the budget is only good for one day. It's only valid for one day, because that's the only day it's going to be exactly what you thought it was. Right. And it's going to change. Portfolios are the same thing. So how do we take that portfolio and run these what if scenarios and simulations to find out what is possible when things do change?
Yeah, that's key. I was meeting with a municipal customer earlier today, and literally that was almost verbatim out of their mouth as far as that's concerned. We were talking around budget, and the idea is that things are in constant flux, and it's really difficult to know where you should be or otherwise at any point. So
yeah, and that's why I'm excited with this whole trending towards automating some of these simulations within a project technology like Project Insight.
Right. And I think that's a great, kind of qualifier in this idea. Again, you can do this in Excel. You can do this in other places. The nice thing about having a tool like our wonderful platform here is it makes it easier, right? It's really simple. It's streamlined. I can come in and do this. Moreover, anybody with the appropriate permissions can come in and do this. And this kind of work, flow that we're going to describe here is this idea of what Diane just mentioned. I have limited resources. I have a new initiative that my leadership is saying I must start within a specific amount of time. It's a non-negotiable. So now I have to figure out where my give and my take is going to come from to plan that out. So I'm here on this portfolio just to highlight the fact that, I have this new initiative approved for discovery, Operation Ghost here, that you can see is the name of the project. I can click right to it from that portfolio view, where then I have the understanding that, hey, this thing is critical and it needs to start at the beginning of next month. Good luck, right? To have at it. Well, to the earlier point, I don't have unlimited resources. I do have constraints that I have to work within. So how can I get this project started when I have other pieces in flight, which we were viewing on that portfolio page? So
and what would it impact if I just...
And what's it going to impact? Exactly. So, here I'm on a portfolio allocation report within Project Insight. I have all of my projects that are active grouped together by the priority that they're in, right? So what I'm viewing here is the idea of how much effort this is going to take and what the cost to get this work done is. This can be labor specific, this can be non-labor, or a combination. This is really just the entirety of that is what that boils down to in this particular instance. Now I've got to get Operation Ghost in here, and how can I see what that is going to do to my budget? I'm looking at my first quarter of this year where I know that, I know what my budget is. It's $900,000, and I'm right now $50,000 under because I know something's going to come up, and this is it. So I can go into our simulation planning here. I can find the project that I'm looking for as a whole. I can then decide if I want to show the prior total and what the change looks like, which I'm going to do for this particular instance. And then I'm going to run this scenario. And what I'm saying is, what if I took on that project? I can see here that my total budget in my critical, project work is going to go up by $77,000 as that initiative has now been taken on. So I'm going to go from that 85, let's say 850,000 to 926, which is going to throw me over my budget by a little more than, about $27,000, which means that, yikes, now I need to find a take for this, give that I'm going to be putting in here to put in. Because these are grouped together by priority, it can make it really easy if the organization has already gone through that grooming process to understand. I can drill in and look at my mediums or my lows to see, hey, when do these initiatives begin? What month do they start? Or are they just now ending? And maybe if I have something that's ending this month, maybe I don't want to push that back, right? It's not worth a lot of value anyway, but moreover, it's already in flight. In any instance, I can come back into my simulation planning, and we're going to move Nova Bank OS. I can say, hey, what if I were to change this particular, piece here? I have the ability to use a pre-planned what if, which we'll talk about in a moment, or I can build one right here on the fly and just say, hey, what if I push this back by, 6 weeks as an example? I can then say forward 6 weeks, save, and then I can rerun this scenario. And it's now going to give me the idea that Nova OS is kicked off my list of this quarter because I've pushed it out 6 weeks. It'll be a Q2 problem. I'll worry about that as that bridge comes up. And now I can come in here and really understand, hey, that actually wasn't quite enough, right? I'm at 911. I'm still, $12,000 over. And while my leadership team or my governance board or whoever's in charge is really nice, they're pretty stickler on budget. How about on your side, Diane? Is that typically the case? Yeah. So I've got to figure out another plan to get that particular one done. One of the pieces we were talking about was this idea that some of my initiatives that I'm doing may be really long-lasting projects, right? I know that I'm going to get deliverables in return over Q3 of this year and Q2 of next year and so on. So maybe I might want to pause the work that's happening on one of those and see how that impacts my scenario planning here. So I'm looking here, I'm going to, just make a call out because I know my portfolio. I've got Project Dewdrop here, which falls right in that particular case. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that project open in another tab where I can see the work as it is in flight, right? I can see the tasks that have been complete. I can see the work that's upcoming. And maybe this is what I want to push out, put some of these pieces on hold to see if that's going to give me, fit within the budget constraint that I'm looking for. What I can do then is come into my edit of my project, and then I can go into what if simulations. If I already have an option built out or one of these different pieces like that, push it forward or so on, I can see that right here, right? And I can do that. If I want to create one completely new, I can just say add. This will give me the ability to name this. I'm going to name this option B. I can decide if I want to go with the simple push this whole thing forward, or in this instance, I'm actually going to just add duration to one of the tasks that's currently happening and push the rest out accordingly. So I can see that my option B has been created, where I'm going to then click into this. And from here, I can see that copy of that same active task list that I had. Now, this is something where I can work without hesitation of messing up Diane's project plan that she has in play, or whoever the main stakeholder is on that particular project. I can come in here and change any of the dates around. I can add duration if that's what it looks like. I can move my start date, which is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in here and say, you know what? I'm not going to have the time to be able to begin this particular task and anything else that's subsequent in this quarter. I'm going to actually push this guy out into beginning of Q4. We'll start that first full week, and I'm going to save this what if scenario here. So again, what I've done is I've copied my task list. I've now modified it where Project Insight is showing me via my impact indicator what that downstream effect looks like. We're going to go back into our portfolio allocation report that we were looking at right here. I'm going to rerun this report just to update it, right? Because I now have a new option to be able to try out. And I'm going to bring in Project Dewdrop and option B here and see if that's going to get me within the threshold that I'm looking for. And it does. My total now is under the 900,000 that I've been allocated. It's a little bit higher than what I started this entire initiative at, which was 850. But more importantly, I've been able to find a viable way in which I can bring in that fire hot new initiative that we need to do while balancing the resources that I have. From here, I can come in and say, apply these changes, which would then update those project plans. And then voila, we're good to go. Everybody's kind of off to the races.
What's beautiful about that is because you're not doing those what ifs, and I'm going to use probably the bad term. You're doing them real time, but you're not affecting real work, right? Which is great, because how many times have we been in a situation where somebody says, stop that project or whatever, and somebody just stops it, right? Now you can kind of huddle up and kind of do some what ifs before, say, okay, well, we think this one might work. Oh, maybe not, or I need to do these two things, kind of do it a lot more deliberately, so that when you do say, this looks good, you get that approval, then you're not having people, work on things inappropriately.
100%. And also, again, talking to the idea of enhancement, right? It's like our application, Project Insight, allows you to send automatic notifications out. So I don't need to write an email to say, hey, Diane, I need you to do this. Can you please get it done? It'll automatically do that. But when I'm doing this what if planning, I'm not disrupting those pieces. I'm not sending you out 20 notifications to say, stop, started, right? You're going in here and being, to your point, being very methodical about what that looks like.
And then with your integrations with like Jira and DevOps and all that gets updated. So people are working on their tasks in an appropriate manner.
100%. Now, there's one other component to this that you were talking about, right? The fiscal part's obviously key with our organizations, right? We're here to serve shareholders, because that's what the corporation does. But we have resources that do that, right? That's the other part here is it's the individuals that make up our wonderful companies that make that, return happen, whatever that looks like. Within our tool, including on this portfolio allocation report, I can come into the filter and I can say, show me my capacity as well, minus my work hours. And then on this particular screen, I do have the ability to understand, hey, do I even have the bandwidth to do this work, right? Can I do this same kind of model and plan and show what those looked like previously? If you are a resourcing manager or somebody who is specifically concerned about that as a whole, we do also have an entirely separate reporting system or reporting class, if you want to think of it like that, around resource allocation, where I can drill in and see everybody, and based on the roles and based on the individuals and so on. This is another place where that simulation planning comes into play. So whether you're more worried about the financial outcomes, you could be in that portfolio allocation report, or if you're more worried about the people, you can do it here. The nice thing about, or both, exactly. That's what I was just going to say. The nice thing about that is you can cross these friends together and really show that you care about both the financial or the outcomes that you're producing and the people who are going to get that work done. So, But that's really where that again enhancement comes in. It's great to do it within a tool like ours because I can make all that happen right here on the fly without racking my brain or running macros or moving a million sticky notes across something else. So.
Oh, come on. The sticky notes are fun.
You know what? I'm going to say it. I'm going to bring them out right now, Diane. I've got at least 2 color sticky notes right here on my desk, right? But
We all use those sticky notes.
I don't want to do my complex project planning with those, however.
No,
so.
no, not at all. No, that's great. Well, and then, and we all that are on this call, we all can understand that this happens all the time. We're constantly being asked whether or not we can support inserting something into the plan. And this is a really great way to do that. But you're going to be asked maybe 3 or 4 things, and then how do I pick and choose which one I can do? And the fact that we can do different types of options in the simulation is great. But, and again, it's about understanding what the non-negotiables are, like the things that you're not going to change, right? Understanding where those resources are and what, and how much is it acceptable over allocation. And then it's like achievement of that growth. And what is it the minimum we're trying to accomplish for that year? So as an organization, you should have some threshold that says this is good or this is bad. For example, for achievement of the non-negotiables, maybe it's something like no critical project is being delayed more than 30 days, right? That could be your threshold. I mean, you can't really say no changes at all for any of them, but there has to be something that kind of says that it's in green. Or maybe from a capacity standpoint, certain critical resources aren't over allocated more than 10% over, 10% in any particular month or something like that. Have to have something to measure whether or not this is an acceptable option or an unacceptable option. And then the growth could be, are we hitting the returns? Remember how we talked about the different aspects of a financial portfolio? Maybe, are we hitting the returns on any particular project? And when you look at the costs of those projects, like you were showing earlier, Matt, it's just flipping the formula around. Like if those costs go up, because you've extended the length of the project, then your margins go down, right?
Right.
So you can relate that cost to the actual margin expected of that particular project. If it's a organizational initiative, sometimes that's a little harder, but you should have some sense of what's acceptable and what's not, and have that threshold, what the upper control limit or lower control limit should be. And then you can put something very simple together, saying like, here's my 3 projects that we're being asked to implement. We want to add a new client for delivery in December, and we want to get 3 new features for a critical client in the Q3 release, or we want to accelerate the delivery for ABC company by 60 days. These are all typical things, and you should look at them individually to see how they impact. Like the first one, if everything else was, not even brought up, that first one, it's all green. Non-negotiables don't change. Critical capacity doesn't change. Expected growth is good. That one you can probably just plug in,
Right.
But once you add the other ones to it, that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. And then if you look at all 3 in combination, what does that do? And if I was the portfolio manager working on this, I would look at, okay, well, that third one, accelerating the delivery for ABC company by 60 days is really wreaking havoc on our plan. So let me pull that one out, and can I get to a much better situation? So having some specific measurable threshold for these aspects of your simulation will help you be able to present to the organization what can be done. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't ever propose, we could do that third one if I had A, B, and C. If you want to increase the budget, if we want to get some new headcount, if we want to go get a contractor to do some of those things. But at least now you're talking a very logical, presentable options and not just gut feel and saying, oh, we can't do it, or it's going to overwhelm everybody, blah blah blah. You're actually being very, very logical and strategic about how you're looking at these potential changes that are going to come through, and they are going to come through. I've never ever has there ever been a year that nothing changed.
Yeah, I think we're past that as far as that's concerned. We're not all on the farm and working with the sun and kind of going with that. So
Even that
um,
can change.
yeah, well, that weather, that's fair. That's a good
There's
point.
nothing that can.
Uh, our almanac, though, but I think that's a extremely valid point. The other piece that's nice about this approach of going to your leadership is one, you're showing that initiative that I have a plan for this, right? This isn't a gut check. This isn't a no, I can't do that. You're proving it with data to show you're pulling up that portfolio allocation report, which says what is critical, what is my capacity. We have a revenue side as well where you can show that at the same point to say this is the offset of what that looks like, right? So,
and then give the leaders the option to say, you know what, that one you thought was high priority isn't quite as high priority as this one. Let's switch that out for this accelerate delivery one.
yep,
And like, okay, I'll run that scenario and see what happens there.
yep, exactly. So,
So it's an excellent way to communicate, you know, how to adapt to change on a regular basis.
the key being we have our priorities in play, we know what we need to be doing, right? And then we can modify and pull the levers as we need to.
Absolutely. And that's what we wanted to go over today. So hopefully this has been super helpful for people. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If you hit some scenarios that we can't figure out, we're more than happy to help there.
That's right. Time to grab out your phone as far as that's concerned. So get that QR code scanned. Again, your PDU will be sent to you before the end of the week as far as that's concerned. If you, for some reason, don't receive that, please reach on out. If you do have any questions about how any of these pieces can be put to use and you are a customer of ours, please reach out to your dedicated account manager. If you're not, please reach out and we'd happily, to Diane's point, walk you through how we can model any of those pieces out. We really appreciate everybody's time. You feel free to join us next week, and please do, where we'll be talking about our power tutorial series. So this was our professional development where we give you the PDUs. The power tutorials where we show the capacity and abilities within Project Insight. We're going to talk about our new AI features. So it's a really very exciting, very topical and all of that. And we'd love to have you attend. That will be a 30-minute session as opposed to our typical 15. So
you can't talk that fast, Matt.
Yeah, I can't. There's too many new features. I can't get them all in that 15-minute window, right? Exactly. Yeah. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe you'll be listening to a chatbot next week. But
there you go.
Again, thank you all for joining us. We look forward to having you on our upcoming pieces. Please do follow us on the social platform of choice. That's a great way to be in the loop as to when our next tutorials and webinars and all of the different pieces that we put out as an organization are there. So thank you all.
We'll see everybody soon. Happy New Year.